Hi, this is Mrs. Rubright with Algebra 1, and we are doing today 1.3, solve equations by multiplying or dividing. Let's hide this stuff out of the way. Let's do this. Okay, so you can solve addition and subtraction equations by performing a series of inverse operations that isolate the variable on one side of the equation. Multiplication and division equations can be solved in a similar way. The multiplication and division properties of equality, as well as other properties below, can be used to justify the steps taken to solve a multiplication or division equation. All right, so the multiplication property of equality. If A equals B, then A times C equals B times C. So as long as you're multiplying the same thing to both sides, then you're keeping the equation balanced. The division property of equality. If A equals B and C is not equal to 0, then A divided by C equals B divided by C. So as long as you're dividing both sides by the same number, the equation will remain balanced. The inverse property of multiplication. If A is not equal to 0, then A times 1 over A times its multiplicative inverse equals 1 over A times A, which is 1. Basically, this is just saying that any number times its reciprocal, right, or multiplicative inverse equals 1. Any number times its flip is going to be 1. So, if I had 2/3, 2/3 times 3 over 2 times the reciprocal of that fraction is going to be 6 over 6, which is 1. Because 3 divided by 3 is 1, these both reduce, and we just get 1. Any number times its reciprocal will be 1. That's the multiplicative inverse, or the inverse property of multiplication. Depending on which textbook you're in, they name it differently. Identity property of multiplication. Any number times 1 is itself. So your identity property of multiplication, any number times 1. Remember the addition property? The identity property of addition was any number plus 0 is itself. With multiplication, any number times 1 is itself. Associative property of multiplication. Once again, this is the B used to associate with C. B was friends with C, dumped C for A. He's associating with someone new. Okay, associative property, that's when your parentheses change. You're associating with someone new. Your friendship circle just changed. Multiplying or dividing to find the solution set. All right, well, let's look. Find the solution set. 5y over 3 equals 20. So they did 5y over 3 equals 20. What are they doing here? I don't know what, they didn't do anything other than add parentheses. I'm not exactly sure why. Oh, there's supposed to be blanks here. They didn't copy on my on the copy machine. There's actually 2 blanks here, 2 boxes that need to be filled in. So they're just wanting us to put in what we would do. So what's the first thing we would do? We can get rid of the denominator, right? So that we don't have a fraction. So we can just multiply by 3 on both sides, and those would cancel that out, right? When we multiply by 3 on both sides, we're just going to call that the multiplication property of equality. These didn't really transfer over. Let me just add the blanks in so you guys can see where there's supposed to be blanks. Okay. So, next. Associative property of multiplication. That's when we do the parenthesis changes, correct? So over here we would have 3 over 3, and then this was 3. 3 over 3 is what? So basically, instead of having the parentheses over here, they move this 3 over here to show you that it becomes 1. They're just showing extra steps that I normally never show, just being honest. I'm just like, okay, they cancel out, gone. Well, they're just showing you, oh, let's move it from inside these parentheses to over here so that they can visualize and see that 3 divided by 3 is 1, right? And instead of doing that and this in the same line, they like to just break it all up. So 3 times 20 is 60, but they don't even let me do that yet, do they? No, because why would they let me do that? Because they're going to say, okay, so for here, that was the associative property. Going from here to here, 3 divided by 3 is 1, right? And that's going to be the inverse property because any number, right? Inverse property of multiplication. Then 1 times anything times itself is always your identity. Then they're finally going to let me do my multiplication over here. 3 times 20 is 60. Now I need to do what to both sides? Divide by 5 on both sides. And that's the division property of equality. 60 divided by 5? I heard it. 12. So they're breaking it down way more than we normally ever would want to or think to do, right? But I guess we have to kind of get into that habit. Just in the ones where they want you to explain it out. Because they're more like a proof, which you're going to get into a lot of algebraic and geometric proofs when you get into geometry next year with me. Yes. All right, so solve. Ooh. Sorry, this thing keeps popping up. I'm going to have to restart my computer later. Okay. Solve 5y over 3 equals 20, using only the multiplication property of equality. Show your work and justify each step. Okay, so we're only using the multiplication property of equality. So, the first thing I would do is multiply by 3 on both sides. And I'd have 5y equals 60. Using only the multiplication property of equality. So then I can't divide by 5 because I can only use the multiplication property of equality. So I can multiply by 1/5. Or from the start, I could have multiplied by 3 over 5, the multiplicative inverse. Either way. So you kind of want to do that. Multiply by 3 over 5 on both sides. Makes sense? 20 times 3 is 60 over 5, which is going to be 5y. Oh, no, it's not 5y. It's the 5's gone, right? Y equals 60 over 5. That's how I would do it. Right? Like, because this would be your the inverse property of multiplication, right? Do you want to see how they did it? Because they like to make things drawn out. They're extra special. So, I'll zoom this in so you guys can see. If it had like blanks to kind of show you. So, all right. So they did the multiplication property of equality, where they multiplied by the reciprocal, right, which is what we did. But then they do the associative to show you like that they're pairing them together, and then the inverse to show you that, okay, now they're 1. Then they go and do the identity property, anything times 1 is itself, and then they finally simplify, which is just way more than anyone should ever have to do but my hunch is they're going to make you do that more like that on the EOC. So it's good to see it, know how to do it. But on a normal problem that's not one of these extended responses, you would never have to do this. Like, you just do the problem, okay? All right, so which method is more efficient? Not writing it all out. So using the multiplication property of equality, multiplying the reciprocal instead of multiplying and then dividing is more efficient. So if you just went straight to multiplying by the reciprocal versus, okay, let's multiply by 3 on both sides, then divide by 5 on both sides, that would be like more of a two-step equation, right? You'd have an extra step than if you just went straight to multiplying by the reciprocal. So using the multiplication. Wait, did I just skip letters? I was not thinking, sorry. Okay. Using the multiplication property of equality, because using the reciprocal is faster than multiplying and then dividing. You have one less step. All right. So find the solution set for each equation. State the property you used. So what would I do here? I'm going to multiply by 5 over 4 to both sides, right? B equals, I'm going to cross reduce 1 and 4. B equals 20. So my solution set is 20. And what did I use? What did I do? I multiplied on both sides, right? Multiplication property. All right, how about here? What do? Divide by 7 on both sides, right? W equals 15. So your solution set is 15. And I divided on both sides. So division. And you could put POE for property of equality. So I actually could do that here too. POE for property of equality. All right, so here we go. Use the properties of equality first. Justify each step. So the first thing I would do is I'd multiply by 4/3 on both sides. And that is the multiplication property of equality, right? It's like the multiplicative inverse too, but same thing. Now I'd do the same thing again. I'd multiply by 3 over 2. M equals 16 times 3, 6, 12, 18, 1, 3, 4, 48. And that's the multiplication property of equality again. So once again, that's how I would do it on the EOC. just so that you guys can see how to break it down if you needed to break it down into all those extra steps that aren't necessarily that critical, because nobody does this in real life. So you can see they wrote the problem, then they multiplied by the reciprocal first, which is multiplication property of equality. Then they're showing you them, so they're changing the parentheses for the associative property. Then they're actually performing this, which is 1. They're writing that step out, so they can then say, right, so they're showing the inverses. Then they're getting rid of the 1. Anything times 1 is itself, identity. Whatever you do to get rid of this, going from here to the next step, that's where you put the reason. They got rid of the 1 because of identity. Going from here to here, what did they do? They simplified that, so just simplify. Going from here to here, what did they do? They multiplied by the reciprocal on both sides. That's multiplication property of equality. Going from here to here, they changed the parentheses, associative. Going from here to here, they simplified this, right? These are inverses. When you multiply by inverses, it equals 1, so that's the inverse property. They have the 1 here. There, they don't have the 1, so they're getting rid of the 1. Why? Identity. And then now they're simplifying this. Simplify. So you should be able to pick out the reasons and be able to identify the reason there next to it. The reason is always what happened from the line before to that line. What did they do? Make sense? So are we able to, drag and drop or fill in blanks if given this with missing parts? Yeah. Kind of like we did in the notes, right? Would we do this on every problem? Heck no. Because that's just extra. Did this just pop up? Sorry again. All right. So that is everything on 1.3, because you guys are going to do your homework is going to be page 21 and 22 on 1.3. So I'm going to stop this recording.